My name's Lyle Moore. I'm currently a senior concept designer at DNA Games in Vancouver, Canada. I've worked in the entertainment industry since around 2004, starting off mainly doing visual effects and motion graphics for film and moving on for film and TV, and then moving on to concept design and video games.
So, what is concept art design then?
Usually at the start of a project, whether in entertainment, whether it's film or video games, somebody has an idea, but it's just an idea at that point. Like we want to make a movie in space, or we want to make this epic first person shooter, but there's that whole sort of, what does it look like? How is this game going to function and stuff? So what concept designers do is we start going with the ideas and reference that, or going working off the ideas, collecting reference, and then actually doing drawings and paintings and 3D mock-ups of what the world and gameplay could look like and potentially be, to start developing that. And then you define like the art style, how gritty is it going to be, how gory is it going to be, and to develop whatever the IP is going to be released to the public. So, and this goes back to the old Universal monster films, or like Alien, and like huge blockbuster films is sort of where concept design started, because they were building these you know giant giant epics, science fiction or horror or fantasy worlds, and they needed to know what these costumes and castles and everything needed to look like to actually build them.
So, like, does someone just tell you what they want to look like? Like, what they want a creature to look like?
Correct. So for instance, uh it could be some usually get a design brief. Like one brief that I got was like, we want to make a running platform game where the main character is a cute ghost character, right? You start to think of we start doing all these drawings of what this character could be, and how do you make it cute and not more cute and fun and not scary. We want it to be more painterly and stuff, and then and you go out and you collect reference. So you could have, sometimes what they give you is like, we want a fantasy game, that hits whatever, a 14 to 22-year-old demographic who like to shop at Hot Topic, you know what I mean? And then so you're going to put things in there that obviously they like. So they're kind of into, emo metal music. They obviously like video games and stuff, and they're into a certain sort of quirky, dark but fun world, So it all depends. Like, and it can be like, oh, we if you take like Lord of the Rings, or some other projects that I'm on. But oh, well, let's take Lord of the Rings and How to Train Your Dragon. Those are two worlds that contain dragons, and have very in somewhat similar fantasy elements. They're Lord of the Rings being European, and also J.R.R. Tolkien drew a lot on sort of Nordic um, influences, and like Beowulf and stuff, and so does sort of the Norse Viking in How to Train Your Dragon. But obviously, with Lord of the Rings, they're going for sort of this high, they want to appeal to like the Tolkien fanatics, so they're going for like a higher fantasy demographic, where How to Train Your Dragon wants to appeal to the whole family, right? So you go through And you can go out and look at the art books for both of those IPs. When I say IP, it means intellectual property. It's not just developing the game or the movie. You're developing all these other things that could potentially come along with that, merchandising and stuff like that, right? So when you look at both of those, they're directing their art and design to different audiences, and you can see the iteration process. Especially if you look at like Disney films or How to Train Your Dragon, you know how cute and cuddly and appealing can you make it versus, you know, in Lord of the Rings, especially how scary and menacing and dark can you make it if you're designing a dragon for How to Train Your Dragon versus you know, Smog for Lord of the Rings. They're two dragons that serve two very different functions, right? And two totally different design aesthetics. And so you have to try and find your voice when you're working, because you know that's sort of something that makes or breaks a game or movie is how appealing it is, and does it stand out, or is it just ripping off something else that's already popular, which isn't necessarily a good way to go. You know, usually copying doesn't get you very far.
So, what skills do you believe that are extremely necessary for being like a concept art designer?
Um, you need a foundation in art, obviously. Drawing and having strong drawing skills and painting skills is obviously good. Sometimes strong, you know, 3D skills. But we talk about a lot just being able. People who draw tend to draw one, like whatever they like a whole lot, like muscle guys with swords, or like their favorite video game character, or like yeah, whatever. But we always talk a lot about visual development, meaning um you know, you can create a character based on anything, and you see it a lot in animated films that, you know, they want a tall nerdy character, so they base it on this like skinny lamp or this broom or something to push the proportion into that, or you know, and you can sometimes see the influence, or they have a certain actor that's voicing the character, so they take elements from that and sort of put them into the character, whether he's voicing a human character or an animal character, or an inanimate object that's coming to life in that sort of realm. So it's not only being able to draw, it's building this design sensibility and being able to draw a lot of things, and then also being usually when I'm giving something to draw, like one day I might be designing buildings, then another day I might be designing, you know, crazy fantasy creatures, and another day, you know, something totally different, a background or an ocean scene or an underwater scene. So it's also about being able to collect reference when needed, and drawing a whole bunch and doing studies and going to life drawing to build up this visual library to be able to draw upon when you're given these tasks of design. And one of the main things that's really interesting to find out you start um, when somebody starts going into this I want to be a concept designer path is we as human beings in North America um, base a lot of what we find appealing and stuff off of the human body, meaning we all have these design ideals that when we look at other people we find attractive. And it also strangely figures into like what like cell phone we find attractive, or what chair we find attractive and stuff like that. Like there's certain shapes that were, you know, genetically set up to like and find appealing. The same way with colors and stuff. If you ask most people in North America, their favorite color is usually blue, and it's usually sort of a light sky blue as well, because as humans, we find that very comforting to go out and it's not a rainy day and the sky's blue, and that's very it's a very safe color for a lot of us. So yeah, it's strong drawing skills, and then building up these visual libraries to know what people find scary and gross, and when you have to design something scary and gross, and knowing what is appealing and sexy, and when you have to design something that people are going to be attracted to. Yeah, it's science. It's really funny. It turns out to be science. It turns out to be psychology. You end up dealing with a lot of these things. You have to research anatomy to know how things work. Because if you're designing a character or creature, that has to be, the design doesn't stop with you. It has to go to an animator or a 3D artist sometimes to be actually made, and that has to function, and that takes some getting used to as well. If the anatomy doesn't function properly in real world standards, it's not going to work as a character. So you have to know that stuff and learn it.
So, like, what got you started to like look into this topic? Like, was this a dream? Did you start thinking about this in high school or preschool? You know what I mean?
It started probably around the age of 6. Just getting my first, like, I was always into video games and stuff, and it's like, people start asking you what you want to do when you grow up, and it's like, well, if I could make this or design this, or that'd be awesome, right? Because you know growing up in St. Mary's, for me, it I hate to say this, but it was like horrifying seeing that cement plant at the one end of town, you know what I mean? Because it's like, is that where I'm going to work the rest of my life? Or like, and I can remember having conversations with friends going like, um, is that where we're all going to end up, type of a thing, right? And so I can remember I actually have lots of memories of me trying to draw and trying to learn to draw, or wanting to do certain art projects, but my dad not really knowing like what to do or what to get, or where to go for the stuff. And it's 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 just about being driven, and wanting to do it. I have a friend who is down in LA, who is like, um he's one of the best sculptors in the world, and he works a lot on different films and stuff, and he's noted for his ridiculous sculptures, and his sculptures sell as fine art and stuff, as well as his film work. But when he grew up in England and his family was fairly poor, and when he wanted to sculpt, his dad and him would sneak through farmers' fields to go to like riverbeds to dig clay, because they knew sculptors sculpted with clay. They didn't know what type of clay, but he wanted to sculpt and was going to do anything to do it. So they were digging it out of clay out of the bottoms of rivers, so he would have clay to sculpt with. And it's that type of, you almost have to be a, s- a s- a little bit insane not insane maybe, but obsessive or something. Like, my friend Mike was gonna sculpt no matter what, to the point where he was gonna dig it out of riverbeds. So, you know, it you end up hitting the point where you're going to draw no matter what, and no matter what any or paint, and no matter what anybody tells you, you're just going to keep doing it. And you know so you have to have that drive, because obviously there's a lot of people who want to work in film or video games these days, and design these characters and creatures and stuff. And there's a lot of competition for those positions, and most people ended up getting hired because because of the work, or the work they've done. So you're competing for those positions.
Yeah, like when I
Hmm.
was younger, well, actually, not too long ago, maybe like within 2 years, I kind of maybe thought about going to like game design myself, but
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know too much about it.
Do you design games now? Like, do you design board games or because we I've even worked with people who like are game players that like went to school for game design and even get a job as a designer, but they sometimes don't pan out because they're game players, they're not game designers. And a lot of the game designs that come up are derivative because they're not actually game designers. You know what I mean? Like they're
Yeah, I know. Like at my school, I took ICS with Mr. Shattuck, if you remember him. So basically, in
hmm
that class, like I created a like miniature game. Like it wasn't
yeah,
too hard, but I mean, it's not like it's like World of
yeah.
Warcraft or something.
But people have made tons of money off of like the simplest games too. Or yeah, Minecraft or Flappy Bird or whatever it is. You know, as long but all of those like have something that strikes a chord with a portion of society and you know is good in their own right. It doesn't have to be, you know, the next Halo game or the next Mortal Kombat game. It can be something simple that has a quirky and fun game design that makes it popular.
What kind of things do you like creating? Because like I know you like creating like weird aliens and just creepy space things that are out of this world.
Yeah, I do enjoy that. I don't. Did you go to the password protected website or did you go to my old website? Probably my old one, right? I can send you to the password protected one too as well, or send you some newer stuff. But I also really like games like Rayman or platforming games, Mario Brothers, stuff like that. And I've got a whole slew of designs from a game that came out like that. And then I obviously I love doing like monsters and creatures and all that stuff. I loved like or do love like movies like Alien and Aliens and like Avatar and you know it all depends. If the most successful aliens have very clear design decisions to how they function. Um, for instance, like if we take not like the Navi and stuff, but if you take like the alien creatures from Avatar, and there's a lot of talk about this right now because James Cameron's Avatar film made like a couple $1 billion when it was in theaters, right? It was ridiculous, but it hasn't made the same mark on society that like a Star Wars did or like a Blade Runner or something like that. And it's because like if you ask people other than like the Navi and stuff what those creatures were, they were like, oh, it was like a rhinoceros with an engine strapped on the its chest, or the birds were like pterodactyls with engines strapped on their chest, you know? And they were very sort of ambiently shaped things that aren't iconic, right? Whereas if you look at something like the original Alien or even James Cameron's second movie in that series, The Aliens, that that HR Giger design is much more memorable. It's, you know, struck fear into the hearts of a lot of people who viewed that film, and they're still making films off of and books and comics and everything off of that creature that he designed. But it's because of what the creature was and what it did to you. And like, not to get too adult with it, but like what that creature was a sex rape machine is what it was designed to, right? It was going to violate you, it was going to impregnate you in the worst way possible and do all these horrible things that, and it looked very phallic, you know, with the head design and stuff and mechanical. So it had everything going for it. It had a very clear design purpose, and it was successful in that design purpose. And it was fearful from the face hugger to everything. And you know, this you couldn't see it coming, and it was going to violate you, and everything about that creature's design was set up to do that, you know? And that's what makes successful creature design, is having that clear goal and what the form and function of the creature is, rather than designing ambient forms that look cool but don't function, you know? And that's sort of things function, and it's that thought process that makes successful design. We often talk about at work like form following function, meaning it has to look like what it does, and like, is it cool? What tools does it use? You know what? And you have to meet these design goals to make something work, or it may look neat, but people won't identify with it. You know?
So, what is the
Yeah.
best part about what you do? Like, what do you like the most?
What I love them that I get to be creative every day, and like my job is to go and try to be creative and come up with stuff that is going to inform the game design and delight players. So it can be stressful, but at the same time, like truthfully, I'm going in and painting all day. So like I had summer jobs where I was working in a car factory, or just doing mundane things, or not mundane things, but the same thing over and over again for an 8-hour shift. And I don't do that. I come in, they're like, oh, we need something, we need to come up with a design for this, and I get to go off on it. That doesn't mean it's not stressful or hard at times, but it means that I get to go explore and come up with solutions for something like that.
When you're creating designs, like, what type of programs, or you know what I mean? Like, what do you do? Like, do you just paint all day?
Well, right now, because I'm mostly drawing and painting now, I'm mainly using Photoshop to concept in. I also often use like pencil, paper, markers, and stuff to design, depending on what I'm designing and if I feel like doing that. But I can design in anything. When I was doing more of the visual effects 3D, I was using a lot of like Maya and After Effects and Nuke and stuff. But the main programs used in concept design are probably Photoshop right now, if you're working on a computer, and your 3D software of choice, and probably like if you're doing 3D, ZBrush as well gets used a lot, which is like a 3D sculpting tool. Yeah.
So, like, when you use a tablet, do it freehand? Like, because I can know there's like a pen you use.
Oh, yeah. Usually use a tablet system, or like a screen you can draw on. Most of those are the best ones are made by a company called Wacom, WACOM, and they've sort of got the industry cornered on that stuff. But yeah, you get your Wacom tablet. Nobody draws with a mouse. It's kind of like non and drawing with it's like drawing with a brick or something like that. So that yeah, when I started out on the computer, I was like trying to figure out how to work, and I was like using my mouse. And a friend of mine who had worked in the industry at the time was like, "Why are you drawing with a mouse? That's like drawing with a brick." And he was like, "You need to go buy one of these." So it goes back to that whole like, how hard is it to draw? The first time you try to draw something you've never drawn before, it's going to take some time to learn how to properly draw and get the fundamentals. So if you're comfortable on pen and paper, it'll probably take, you'll probably want to sit down with it for a couple good sessions, like maybe like 16 hours to get used to it, especially if you're using the tablet instead of like drawing like one of the Cintiq systems where you draw on the screen. It's sort of weird to be drawing on one surface and see it happening on the screen in front of you. So that takes, it kind of feels like being ambidextrous or something the first couple times you do it. So you just got to use the tool, and you get used to it. It's like any other tool that you've never used before.
You know those walk-on
Yeah.
tablets you called them, I think, right? Like, how much would one of those things cost?
Wacom tablets? Um, well, they make like sort of like starter ones or cheaper ones and smaller ones that start out around a couple $100, and then I have their like well, I use their a 24-inch Cintiq at work, which is like two generations out of date now. Well, not out of date, but it's a little older generation, and that's like around 17 or $1,800. And then I have their Cintiq Companion, which is like a portable like laptop thing, which is around $3,000 too. So they run the gamut from very cheap to very expensive. But that doesn't mean somebody can't start out with, one of the $250 ones and be successful.
All right. Well, anyways, that's all the time I have right now. Thank you for doing this, though. I really appreciate it. I know it was hard to get around your schedule and stuff, but thank you.